Welcome to When We Die Talks. I'm your host, Zach Ansell. In this podcast, we explore different beliefs about what happens when we die and how those ideas shape the way we live. Thanks for tuning in. I'm glad you're here. Today's episode is brought to you by Amori. How was your first Christmas without your mom? How was your wedding day without your dad? If you know the pain of losing someone you deeply loved, Amori is for you. Amori is a digital time capsule that helps you reflect on mortality, navigate emotions, and create heartfelt messages for your children, so you can feel prepared and let your presence be felt through life's many moments, even when you're no longer here. Let your words become a source of strength and comfort for those you leave behind. Tomorrow isn't promised, but your love can be. Download your mortality companion today at amori.life. That's AMORI.life, and use the code WhenWeDie50 for 50% off. Hey everyone, excited we're back with another episode, and honestly, I'm super proud to have hit this little milestone, 20 episodes. I know we've had a few bonus episodes here and there, but today officially marks the 20th full episode of When We Die Talks. Early on, when I was just getting started, I heard this little stat that says something like 90% of podcasts don't make it past the third episode. And then another 90% of those don't make it past the 20th. So here we are, we've made it, and I just want to say a huge thank you to all of you. I've gotten so much encouraging feedback lately, especially in the anonymous calls, and it means a lot knowing these conversations are resonating. I am once again going to ask for a favor. If the podcast has made you feel less alone, made you think differently, or sparked conversations with someone you love, please consider supporting the podcast to help it grow. I just launched a Patreon, and even a small monthly contribution can make a big difference. It helps cover things like hosting, editing, and promotion, and gives me more time to focus on making episodes and finding new voices to feature. It's still early days for the Patreon, and I'll be looking to add benefits down the road, like early access to episodes and bonus episodes, but for now, it's just a way to say, keep going. I'll add a link in the show notes, and thank you to all of those who choose to support. Now, on to today's episode. I talk with Brynna Fish, someone who has spent much of her life reflecting on what it means to be a soul, both in this world and the next. What unfolds is a fascinating conversation. Brynna sets the stage, sharing some personal experiences throughout her life. A moment of sitting beside a stranger's body after a car accident, a memory of wind interrupting a funeral song, and a message passed between dogs in the great beyond. It then culminates with her sharing her idea of the worldwide soul web, a belief that our souls are composites made up of generations past, and that when we die, pieces of us continue on in the people and beings we are closest to. Whether or not you share her beliefs, her stories offer a view of death that's less about endings and more about connection, healing, and continuity. Lastly, a special shout out from Brynna and I to Holly Pruitt, who was kind enough to connect the two of us. She felt Brynna would be a perfect fit for the podcast, and I couldn't agree more. Okay, with all that out of the way, let's get into it. I hope you enjoy. I'm glad you're doing better. I feel like, I had my fall last year where I messed up my eye, so it's like you and I need to avoid slipping or something. I don't know.
Yeah, I know. And this is not your experience yet, but I don't know what age they start doing this, maybe 65. Any doctor you go to, they say, have you fallen recently? And I was like, I hate it when I had to say exactly.
Oh, yeah. Oh, the joys of getting older.
Exactly. And here's what I figure is that, aging people fall. So I hope I got it out of the way. No more.
Yeah. Get it out early.
Exactly.
I'm just thankful to have you on the show. And, I know we've been trying to make this happen for a bit and you had a little accident. And so I'm glad that you're doing better and feeling better and that we're having this conversation now.
Me too.
I don't know. I feel like I had another conversation recently where I had to reschedule because my dog had a seizure and the conversation was with a pet death doula. And so it ended up being a great conversation because we were able to actually talk about this real event that happened to me. And I know he's getting older and he's going to pass soon. And so we were able to have this real conversation. And it was like, this happened when it was supposed to happen.
Right.
And so for whatever reason, and we don't know yet, but I do feel like we're having this conversation today for a reason. And I'm excited to talk to you.
Yes. And actually, a week ago, I participated in a Zoom called Journey of the Soul. And I was super excited that was before we were talking.
Perfect. We did chat a while ago and had a great conversation. And you have a very fascinating concept about what happens when we die. And so like it's going to be really exciting to hear, but maybe you've built upon this concept after your Zoom last week. But I think before we get into that fun stuff, because I do think your idea is very fun and exciting, maybe the best thing would be to get a little bit of information about you, kind of your background and your relationship with death.
Sure. So I'm 67 years old. I grew up Jewish in the conservative movement. And I remember, okay, so first of all, I was always a good student. My
Me
siblings,
too.
didn't like that I was the good daughter, but I was always curious. And I remember as a teenager asking a rabbi about, do Jews believe in reincarnation? And I would ask almost any learned Jewish person that question. And, first I got no, 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 no. Then I got, well, yes. And this really opened me up. So the idea is that, and I think this is not true just of Jewish people. I think this is true of all human beings, that we're born with a destiny. We're born with work that we're supposed to accomplish in our life in this realm. And to the degree that we don't finish the tasks or even start one of them, if for instance, if I was sent here with multiple destinies and I got some of them done and some of them not, then those pieces of my soul would be, I'm going to say, up for grabs in the worldwide soul web, and I'll explain that later. But I didn't get an individual soul that belonged, say, to my grandmother when I was born. I got a composite soul. And I liked that idea. I liked that it's the work that I was supposed to accomplish here wasn't finished. And so it's going to be finished eventually, which makes my procrastination efforts, it's not good for my habit of procrastinating. Okay, so I had that. Then as a young adult, I had a couple of friends in the car with me, and we were driving on a highway in Cincinnati and saw a car coming the other direction, lose control, fly over the barrier and through a semi-truck. And it was a bad accident. And literally we're stopped just a couple of cars behind where this happened. And at some point I noticed a man lying in the road. Nobody was paying attention to him, none of the responders. And I'm like, oh, that man is dead. I felt a strong need to go sit there with that body because it occurred to me, this man has a family. This man is just died and is alone. And I think also where that came from in me is in Judaism, we have an idea, a practice that when the body dies, it should not be left alone at all. And so even
it's for, sorry, I don't mean to cut you off, but it's for a decent amount of time too, right? Isn't it like 24 hours or something like that?
Well, it depends on what flavor Jewish you are.
Okay.
The Orthodox, the very observant folks, they want to be buried as fast as possible. And it's because we don't believe in embalming. We believe in ashes to ashes, dust to dust. Okay, we could do a whole other conversation about the environmental impact of that. Also, the idea is the soul sort of hangs out with the dead person because the soul's concerned. Something's happening to the body that I have been in, and the soul will be more likely to ascend, if you will, when the person is interred, when they're in the ground properly. And that's something I just learned on the journey of the soul.
Oh, nice.
So it had a profound impact on me, seeing this guy in the road and me just sitting there until they shooed me away because I was a danger to the dead body or something. So then I get into college and I'm an RA in my dorm, and I'm talking about the late 70s. And one of my sister resident assistants astro projects. Okay, so she can, it's not so much going back or forward in time, but it's being able to somehow leave your body with consciousness, go somewhere and come back. And I knew this about her. And I went to a lecture with her and a couple of other gals. And I remember sitting in the lecture, hearing the guy's introduction. And then the next thing I know, I've been in the clouds and I come back into my body. So MJ took me on a trip. She said she felt like I was open to it, and she took me on a trip. And I was like, okay, my mind and heart, everything's expanding. Okay. So I don't have any recollection of it except the coming back into my body. Then in college or in graduate school, I had an issue of tachycardia where your heart beats faster than it's supposed to. I passed out, and I have a vivid experience of lying on the floor. And I don't know, a dozen people standing over me, looking at me. This is before the EMS people got there. And I was above it watching. And I was like, this is cool. I mean, I totally wasn't nervous or anything. And, okay, then the EMS people came, and then I was like, okay, back in the body. Again, just a curiosity. Then a friend of mine was into spiritualism. I happened to be Jewish gal, and she invited me to go to a spiritualist church. And this is what happens in spiritualist churches. And actually, there's a place not far from Cleveland called Lilydale, and it's in Western New York. It's an intact village. It looks like you're walking into the 1820s. And it's all clairvoyants and psychics and past life regressionists. So they did a few psalms, like it was like a universalist church kind of psalms. And then they explained that if spirit wants to talk to you, it was a mother and daughter who were I forget whether they were priests or whatever their clergy name was. And they said, we'll come to you and say, spirit would like to speak to you. And you can say yes or no. There's no judgment. Okay, well, the very first person they approach is me. And
of course.
Yeah. And they have a message from somebody who is dear to me. And her first name starts with T. And I'm going through my brain, T. Then I get it. My grandmother. I never called her Teresa, right? She's Grandma Fish. I say, yes, it's my grandmother, Teresa. Well, the message is that she wants me to know that even though I've been through some tough things, that she is always with me. She's always standing behind me. She always has my back. And that was pretty intense. My dad had died quite unexpectedly a few years earlier than that. Anyway, that piqued my interest. And then I had a couple of past life regressions. So I found out that I was on Amelia Earhart's crew. No, I don't know where her plane is. And well, this is because there's consciousness in the past life, but the consciousness doesn't stay with us in the current life. And then I was a revolutionary soldier. And in that past life, I was a boy. And then my wife at the time and I went to a guy who we both knew. And she went first and I went second. And it ended up that we went to the same past life where we knew each other. And
interesting.
And actually, Buck Harris, who did that, Buck of blessed memory, in the great beyond and within me, said that he almost stopped me because he thought we made up a story to play a prank on him. But no, he trusted his gut. And just a couple more snippets about how I've nurtured this relationship with soul. So my son was married and they're divorced now. But when they were married, they were packing to go on a trip, and Sarah's father had very recently passed. And I'm sitting in their living room, their dining room, while they're packing. And Kevin says to me, I can hear it as clear as I can hear your voice. He says, please tell Sarah that Papa says you have to tell him. And I was like, okay, I'm not doing anything about this. It's not my business. And the third time he asked, it was just a conversation back and forth. I'm like, no, sorry, I can't do that. And he asked again, and then he asked again. And I was like, okay. So I say to Sarah, I don't know what this means. I don't, if you don't believe me, that's okay. But your father has a message for you, and it's this. You must tell him. Well, she turned ashen. Now, we didn't know at the time that she was having an affair, but her father knew from the great beyond that she was having an affair. I was like, okay. I didn't know that though for years, after they got divorced. I'm like, oh, that's what that was about. Okay, so now 4 years ago, my mom dies. And we didn't have a great relationship growing up. My brother and I had a conversation when my mom's husband passed, her second husband. And I agreed, okay, I'll take her now, you take her later. Well, there's no later. She came back to Cleveland where she was raised. She didn't want to go to Boston. And then she wanted to move in with me, and I didn't want her to, but okay, I did it. Then she was diagnosed with COPD. She was having trouble breathing. And I remember sitting in the doctor's office, and when he gave that diagnosis, I felt a visceral change in my body. Like I felt literally my heart, but also my soul opened up to my mother very differently than I had ever felt about her. I felt total unconditional love for her, and gone was my angst about what kind of mother she was or wasn't. Okay, then she dies quite suddenly, and two things happened in close order. So one is my son and I got to spend about 4 hours with her body in the hospital, just in a regular hospital bed. And I sat on the bed with her and I stroked her head. And it was calming. It was loving. And then when the funeral home people came, I wanted to go with them all the way to the funeral home, but not allowed to. And I knew at the funeral home, they have volunteers from the Jewish community who sit with the body, clean the body, and are with the body until she gets put in her plain pine box. And then, because we have stupid laws here, into the concrete vault in the ground where you're not going to be able to return to ashes and dust very quickly. Anyway, the funeral is 2 or 3 days later. And I had asked a friend of mine to play guitar. I play guitar, but I didn't think I should play guitar at my mother's funeral. And to play guitar and lead us in James Taylor's You've Got a Friend, because my mom loved to sing. So Jeremy was singing, everybody was singing along. And then the line came, and that old north wind begins to blow. And as if on some theatrical stage crew cue, a wind came from the north. It rattled all the trees, the little flaps of the canopy they put over the immediate family. And Jeremy paused for a moment, and then everybody kept singing. But there was everybody gasp. There was a gasp. And at the end of the song, the rabbi walked back to the podium and said, "I have no words. Suzanne has made herself known." And I was like, wow, that's pretty cool. Then we come home from the funeral, and there's a little rose bush in front of my house. My mom's Hebrew name was Shoshana, which in Hebrew means rose. So the rose bush was doing what it's doing today. It has leaves on it. It doesn't have buds yet. We came home from the funeral, Zach, and there were 18 rose blossoms. And 18 in Hebrew means life. Okay, now, it was crazy remarkable. And I'm thinking, okay, the veil is thin and souls have energy, and she's letting us know. Now, it's been 4 years. Every year after, there's been a few less roses, and I'm expecting this summer or next summer, she'll be back to her ordinary rose output, But anyway, this is, just got me going. Okay. And then the last story is, and this is the one that really was like the icing on the death cupcake, if you will. So I have dogs, and every evening when I go to bed, I say a blessing, thanking God for my 5 generations of chosen canine family. 2 of them, my 4th and 5th generation, are here with me, but 3 are in the great beyond, and I acknowledge them. So I've just finished that. Sometimes I say it out loud. Sometimes I say it in my head. And so I just finished my blessing, and all of a sudden, Sadie says to me, Sadie is the 3rd generation, "I have a message for you from Stella, who was 2nd generation." So Stella was a Dalmatian mystery mix. Stella told Sadie, the reason she barked and howled when my son and I were at the APL, we picked out this little Dalmatian mystery mix. I told the truth that I rented, and so I had to go home and get a copy of my lease because
Back to being the goody two shoes.
back to being the goody two shoes.
I would have done the same thing too.
Yeah. And I knew where it was, but it's 45 minutes back. Okay. So by the time I get back, the little dog that was in a holding cell behind like the counter where you check out, I walk up and the gal says to me, I have to tell you, Miss Fish, this dog wailed the entire time you were gone. I've heard dogs whimper, cry a little bit, but this dog wailed the entire time. And I was like, oh, I'm so sorry. But okay, now you're my dog. Okay. So now, and that's, I don't know, that's like late 90s. Okay. And so now it's 2022. Sadie has just gone to the Great Beyond, where apparently she met Stella and tells me this story. And then Sadie tells me why Stella was wailing is because she has a piece of soul from Pepper, who was my childhood Dalmatian. And she thought she was going to lose me again. So she recognized my smell. She knew that she had a connection to me from some other life and was afraid she was going to lose me again. Now, I'm not on any drugs. I couldn't make this up to save my life. And I don't doubt for a moment that this is because the dogs' souls in the Great Beyond could communicate, but they can't communicate necessarily dead to living, living to dead. So I didn't get the message until Sadie died. And so then I'm like part of a soul. So my dog Stella had a part of a soul from a dog I had when I was 6. And I started to read about souls. And suddenly I'm thinking back to the destiny part, like we're born with a destiny, but if we're not finished with it, and I'm like, okay. So this is how I came up with my world.
I was going to say,
yeah,
I don't want to cut you off. I don't want to cut you off before you kind of get into this.
Okay.
But I think this is the perfect kind of point of, I don't even want to say done research, right? But you have all these kind of stories and this history, you life experience. That's a perfect way. You have all this life experience and you've kind of touched on it a little bit at the very beginning. And now again, in the story about your dogs, which I feel like any stories about dogs really just kind of hit me hard. But this really is getting into the heart of this kind of idea that you have about what happens when we die. And so I don't even think I need to ask you the question, what happens when we die, because you are primed and ready to jump in there. But I just wanted to kind of like give a little like moment to like summarize a little bit of kind of, you have all this life experience and now taking that life experience into this kind of theory about what happens when we die. So take it away.
Okay. So I call it the worldwide soul web. And I was trying to think, a couple of friends of mine are challenging me to come up with some visual representation of this. But I'm like, okay, we understand what vibrations are.
One step at a time.
Yeah, one step at a time. We understand what vibrations are. And we understand what energy is. And we understand what emotions are. And none of those things have a physical containment, right? How do you believe in God if you can't see God? Well, how do you believe in the wind if you can't see the wind? You feel the wind, you feel it. So then I started thinking about this soul web. So this piece of Pepper, my childhood dog, got somehow infused into Stella. Well, that exact same thing happens with people. And so when my mom died, there's a piece of her soul that's woven into, okay, maybe imagine Pigpen from Snoopy. who was a character that always walked with a cloud of dust around him. Okay.
Yep.
So imagine that we have around us energetically souls that have been the closest to us in our living realm. So I have a piece of my grandfather's soul and my grandmother's soul. So people who were alive when I was alive, no matter what age, when they passed, a piece of their soul gets woven into my soul web. But the relatives that go back to infinity, 100 years or 200 years or 2,000 years, those relatives, soul stars, were like microscopically, they're in the next generation of souls. Are you following me here? Okay.
So far, yeah.
Okay. So my mom dies. She had a really, really bad relationship with her sister her whole life. Well, where was her plot in the cemetery? Right behind her sister. I think that was it was random, but no accident, right? And we joked, well, maybe they'll work it out now. Well, I absolutely believe that they worked it out, because in the soul realm, there's no judgment. There only is. And this is sort of abstract, but it's not like the bickering that goes on in this realm continues in the soul realm. In the soul realm, everything is love and it's unconditional. And I believe that healing happens in the soul realm. Okay. That's wonderful. Doesn't help us who are in the living in this realm, but it helped me in the grieving process, because I could still feel a closeness to my mother in that soul, worldwide soul web way. A friend of mine, I don't know, friend might be too strong a word. A woman I know, if she were still alive and sitting in this room with me, she'd say, Brynna, of course we're friends. But Jill Sobule is a recording artist who died in a house fire last week outside of Minneapolis. Very tragic. And I believe that because of how we met and kept seeing each other over the years, that there's a piece of her soul web in my soul web. But it doesn't have the same intensity that my mom's soul in my soul web has.
So maybe like a little bit of like the outer reaches of the web,
Exactly.
maybe not the tighter.
Exactly. And all of this helps me feel somehow more grounded as a human being here in this realm. Now, I'm in no hurry to leave it, and I want to live to 120 if my body cooperates, but it's just, I don't know, miraculous to me that we have the mental capacity to think about these things, to digest these things, to have conversations about these things, and then to share the love lesson of it.
I do have a question
Mm-hmm.
there, because I was going to say, you kind of even touched on it a little bit of, it's like this, like theory maybe is a way of putting it, really helps you in this life. And so I guess maybe I have some questions about this kind of theory of what it does mean at that soul level of, our souls, are they made up of a bunch of different souls, or like how does it work on the other side in your mind?
Yeah. So, a couple of things about that. And some of this comes from Judaism's ideas about death and the soul. So, I'm going to answer your question in a sort of
Yeah.
roundabout way. There's a Jewish idea that right before we're born, God imbues us with all the knowledge we need to function in the world. And then when we're born, we forget it. And this little indentation here, I'm pointing to the, whatever you call that cute little dimple above your lip and below your nose, is when the angel touched you in utero to give you all that knowledge that then you forget when you're born. And the idea is that God blows our soul into our nostrils as soon as we're born, which that's pretty cool. Then a Jewish idea, and I'm going to say I don't know about this, but it's that Pema Chodron, the wonderful Buddhist teacher, has a book called How You Live is How You Die. And so this is sort of like that, is if you live your life with kindness, you're investing in your soul. The problem is that consciousness happens here, and consciousness happens between souls, as I know from my dog story, and through past life regression, there's consciousness, but we can't be cross soul pollinated in this realm with consciousness. And this is where I get a little stuck about it, because I think that healing happens when you die. So if somebody was a murderer, they're going to get healed when they die. And if they were in a mafia gang and the guy died before he finished what, the grandfather wanted him to do, he's not going to be in the next life. I don't think that the evil or violent goals that somebody has, I'm not even saying destiny, are going to carry through. I believe that healing happens, and that when the souls come into you when you're born, that it's healthy, using our language. Okay, so now remind me what the question was.
So essentially, what does it look like on the other side in terms of, because a lot of it is, we are kind of collecting these souls of our loved ones in this life, but what's the makeup like on the other side in your mind?
Yeah, well, that's a big mystery. I think that just having this idea the past couple of years about worldwide soul web is the beginning of me having some greater understanding about this. But big mystery, we don't know. And so I can have all the theories I want. And
which is the fun part of it.
It's
right?
the fun part of it. Yes.
You get to explore it.
Yes. But what it really looks like on the other side, I don't know how to go there, except to say, I think it feels like love. And I also believe that it's within us. So something I've started to do recently, which is a friend of mine just posted on Facebook that her little dog, Gizmo, of 12 years, has gone over the Rainbow Bridge. And so I always say, I'm so sorry, Gizmo went to the great beyond over the Rainbow Bridge. Or when somebody dies, they say, oh, you've gone to the great beyond. Well, now I've started to say the great within instead of the great beyond, because I think it's like old Sunday school, whatever flavor religion you were, like, God sat in some chair in the sky with a long beard, and then there's the pearly gates, and St. Christopher's supposed to let you in. I hope I have that one correct.
I'm not sure either.
Okay. And you get a review of your life to determine if you can ascend. So I don't know about all of that. And maybe there are levels of soul cycles. Like, I know that there are some philosophies that you have to come back enough times so that you don't have to come back anymore.
Yeah.
But again, I don't know about that either. Maybe my great, 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 great grandmother isn't coming back anymore, but she doesn't have to, because she's in the great, great, great grandmother and then they're in the great, great, and then they get to me, and I have some of that. I'm not 100% sure. But the other thing is, as alive people in this realm, anything that I do is a legacy for the generations that came before me. And that's something that I've become also keenly aware of. Like, how much of what I believe is my son going to carry in him, or after I die and I'm in my son's soul web in a different form than I am now. And my granddaughter, how is this legacy of how I view and feel and see the universe going to show up? Maybe in 100 years, you and I could have another Zoom, and wherever we are, we'll have different answers.
I like that idea. Should we like set a date and a time to meet again in 100 years?
Absolutely. Yeah, I
Yeah,
think.
I was going to say, I think this is a fascinating idea. And I think the big thing for me is it's like, I'm definitely not doing this project to convince anybody of anything.
Mm-hmm.
Well, actually, let me rephrase that. The only person I'm trying to convince of anything is myself.
Of course.
I'm trying to come up with what I believe, but I love talking to people, especially people like you who have these amazing ideas and stuff. And I think at the end of the day, what I hear from you is like, and again, this is a huge part for me, is, there's a lot of fear around death. And from what I'm hearing from you is it's like, you want to live to 120 and you don't seem like you're afraid to die. Like, I don't also mean in the same sentence of, cool, you're ready to die.
Right.
It seems like you have a lot of peace around the idea of whatever happens, I feel like it's going to be okay. Where,
Yeah.
I think I'm trapped in a little bit of place of, I don't know if it's going to be okay. And that's what stresses me out.
Yeah.
But would you say that kind of rings true for you? Is like, you feel like it's going to be okay. You feel like, you don't have a
Yeah.
ton of anxiety or fear around it.
Well, I like it here. I'd like to stay as long as I could. Yeah, but I'm not afraid of what happens. The other thing is, and I think this plays a role into it, that I didn't think about it until just now, is I've had some experiences that I lived through in my mid-20s. A semi hit my friend's little Honda Civic, and the car was totaled. We walked away without a scratch. My house was struck by lightning. The electrician who came to fix it and saw the damage that occurred said, "I can't believe you're alive." And I could go on. And so some of that makes me feel pressured, like, uh-oh, I lived through this, I lived through this, I lived through this, I lived through this, I lived through this. I better get busy doing what I'm supposed to do here. What is that? Did souls intervene and protect me, make sure that I was kept alive? I don't know. But I definitely feel like everything that I've done in my entire life has been about vibrations. And, I sing, I play guitar, souls are vibrating at a level that we, is beyond our comprehension, but it's a part of me. It's a part of us. And that is it's a comforting and compelling feeling.
I love that.
And I love that you have this podcast, because we need to talk about this. And I know it's like there's death cafes was a thing. I think they're still happening. There are death doulas for animals and for people. And it's a natural part of life. And Zoom that I was on last week, called Journey of the Soul, started up by asking us to answer a question for ourselves: is, who are you? And I write down a couple of things about who I am. And, like, I'm a loving person, I'm a gentle person, I'm a generous person, I'm a forgiving person. Okay. And then they said, well, typical answers are, you're a police officer, you're a garbage
what you
man,
do for a living.
What you do for a living, your occupation, or you're married, you're a mother, you're a father, what your relationships are, or a physical thing. You're a runner, you're a hiker, you're a whatever.
Yeah, something you do.
Something we do. Right. And so the answer they were looking for is, who are you? You're a soul. You're a soul right now. And what you do with your life impacts your soul now and in the great beyond within.
Yeah. I would encourage, I had a mentor a couple months ago suggest to me to kind of do that exact same experiment.
Mm-hmm.
And I combined it with this other experiment that I heard of, but essentially I wrote down 100 things with the title of, who am I?
Yeah.
And you go in little bursts, and it's even sometimes, I would say, cheat, because like the first one I did do, I'm a photographer, but that's my career. And I immediately knew, and I really need to go back again and look at it. But when I went back and looked through it, it's like, no, I'm not a photographer, but I am a creative person.
Mm-hmm.
And that is different. It's not what I do, it's who I am. And, there's a couple other things. And I started to see some themes of like, these are things that I do. This is my job. This is my relationship to other people.
Right.
But when you really look at them, it's, oh yeah, I'm curious, which is part of this podcast, right?
Yes.
It's like, I'm curious, I'm creative. This is actually who I am. So I would say, I would highly suggest sit down, turn your phone off, turn the TV off, turn everything off.
Yeah.
And you'll go in spurts of, hey, I do 10 or 15 and then it's shit, what am I going to write now? And then, you go in another spurt of 10 or 15 and getting to 100 is a lot, but you find a lot of stuff in there. And I think I even just came up with some stuff that was very like, I don't know, philosophical of I am here and now.
Exactly.
That is what I am. I am this moment. I'm not my past. I'm not my future.
Right.
So yeah, I love that you're able to do that because it is such an experience.
Yes. And this is another thing I've come to understand is the finite and the infinite are the same.
Yeah.
Right? Because finite, I'm in this moment right here. And now I'm in this moment, in this moment, in this moment. And that makes all those moments line up to infinity going in all directions. The time, space, dimension, continuum is astounding. And I think that curiosity is what makes us want to have governments send rocket ships into space, right? How far is far? What's out there? Okay. And then we get greedy. How could we benefit from that knowledge? And
what can it do for us?
What can it do for us? What can it do for us? And if I were president of the universe, I would not spend money on that effort until every breathing human being is safe, has the financial resources they need to have a good home and food and educate their kids, and there's peace in the world.
So we've gone very, very, very big picture, right? This theory that you have is very big. And so I want to bring it back down to a much more, not that that's not personal, but to a much more personal level. If you were to die tomorrow, what would you want your loved ones to know?
Oh my gosh. First of all, I hope some of them would be able to go through my piles of index cards and complete the three or four books I've been writing in various stages of. Okay, what would I want them to know or to do? What was the question?
I'd say, what would you want them to know?
Yeah. I think they know it already. I think they know what kind of human being I am, and the way my life experience has had an impact on other people in positive ways. And I don't want to be buried in a pine box in a concrete vault.
It's a good thing for them to know.
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to like force anything out of you, but is there like a central message that you'd want them to like, hey, this is something that I figured out or whatever, and maybe there's not even anything there, but because I think a lot of times it's like, yeah, I'd want people to know that I love them and this and that, but it's,
yeah.
I don't know. I'm curious if there's kind of a step further than that.
Here's something interesting. Such a gift to me. Some idiot left dog poop on my front porch a couple weeks ago, and it sent me into a tizzy. And I thought I knew who it was, and I made a mistake, but not before I went on a rant on 4 different social media platforms. And then I had to apologize and apologize to the people that I thought did this. But my son, his reaction was very different. He wanted to, punch this guy in the face. And in one of the Facebook threads about this, my son responded to somebody else's comment by saying, "My mother always approaches things with kindness." And he's saying about himself, "Me, not so much." And that was such a gift to me, to know in this lifetime that my son recognizes how I respond to things, even challenging things. And that was a great little gift he gave me, which would be something I want them to say is, my mom always led with love.
I think that's beautiful. Thank you so much for taking the time to do this and share try to condense down, I think, even a little bit, your amazing ideas and theories. I knew, when we first got introduced, we just hit it off and had such a great conversation. And I've been looking forward to this and sharing it with everybody, because I think people are going to find it fascinating and it's going to resonate with people. So thank you so much for doing it.
Thank you, Zach.
Thank you so much for joining me on this episode of When We Die Talks. I hope today's conversation sparked some thoughts and helped you feel a little more at ease with the idea of death. Remember, this journey is all about exploring our beliefs and fears together, so I'd love to hear from you. Call our voicemail at 971-328-0864 and share what you think happens when we die. Your thoughts might just be featured on a future episode and could help others on their own journey. Until next time, have a good life.